Hi, boys and girls. It is Tuesday, and we are going to get started on our reading. I would like you to find your e-learning packet and turn to the reading section. We are going to be working with let's see if I can find the page number. We're actually going to start today on page 18, which is the page that we worked on Friday. Page 18 of the reading section is called Wheels and Axles. Now, I know that we already read this story, but I'm going to read it again today. And the reason is because we are going to do some writing about this story. This story is a nonfiction text, and nonfiction means that it is a real story about real things. And what is it about? It's about wheels and axles. Today we are going to be working on page 20. After we read the story, we're going to be working on page 20. Page 20 asks us to use the article or the story to help us understand how wheels and axles work. We talked a lot about diagrams, and diagrams are pictures that have labels that show us how something works. So I'm assuming that this is a diagram that's showing us how a wheel and an axle works together. So we're going to use the diagram that we see right here along with the text or the words from the story to describe what a wheel and axle do. All right, I'm going to dive right in and I'm going to start reading. A simple machine has few or no moving parts. One kind of simple machine is a wheel and axle. A wheel and axle can help move people or objects from one place to another. So right there we just learned what a wheel and axle does. What does a wheel and axle do? A wheel and an axle can help move people or objects from one place or another. Wheels and axles are all around you. Cars and bicycles have wheels and axles. A skateboard has them. Even a Ferris wheel is really just a big wheel and axle. So that's why they have this picture or photograph up here, because they said a Ferris wheel is actually just a really big wheel and axle. This simple machine has a large wheel. It also has a rod called an axle. The axle goes through the center of the wheel. When the axle is turned, the wheel also turns. So to understand this better, we just read about wheels and axles, but to understand it even better, we can look at the text, or we can look at the diagram, right here, the diagram. And in the text, it says an axle goes through the center of the wheel. So here's the axle. You can see it's going through the center of the wheel. It says that when the axle is turned, so when this axle in the middle is turned, the wheel also turns. So they turn together. All right. So we are going to go down to page number 20. On page number 20, it asks us to, let's see here, let me get my pencil ready. Use one detail from the diagram and use one detail from the text to tell how wheels and axles work. Okay, how do wheels and axles work? Well, if I go back up to the text, I can see in this last paragraph, I remember it telling me a lot about how a wheel and an axle come together. This first paragraph is really just telling me that a wheel and an axle is a simple machine. Let's see, it can help move people or objects from one place to another. So that's what it does, but that doesn't explain how it works. In the second paragraph, it tells us that cars have wheels and axles, bicycles have wheels and axles. But this third paragraph is really where it starts to explain how a wheel and an axle work together. It says that a wheel and an axle has a rod. Okay, the rod in the middle is the axle. The axle goes through the center of the wheel, and when the axle is turned, the wheel is also turned at the same time. This part right here It has a rod. Let's see if it will let me, whoops. Nope, that's not what I'm looking for. Let's see if it will let me do a little highlighting here. All right, I am highlighting what it does. Well, it says it has a rod that's called the axle. The axle goes through the center of the wheel. When the axle is turned, the wheel also turns. Okay, that explains to me how it works. That explains how it works. So, the question was, how do wheels and axles work? Well, wheels and axles work because, well, they work because up at the front, up at the top, it says that when the axle is turned, the wheel also turns. So how does it work? The wheel and axles work because when the axle in the middle is turned, the wheel also turns. Okay, so that's how it works. Okay, that explains how it actually works. Now that was from the text. It also wants us to tell how it works using the diagram. So let's go back up to the diagram, and that's that picture that's going to label the parts and tell us exactly what's happening. So how does this diagram make us understand how a wheel and an axle works? Well, we can see right here, here's the axle. The diagram helps us see that the axle is in the middle. This arrow shows that the axle is moving, and then this arrow is the wheel. So as this axle is moving this way, it shows that the wheel is also moving at the same time, just like the text said, that when the axle moves, the wheel moves at the same time. So the diagram shows us that once the axle is turned, the wheel ends up being turned in the same direction. The wheel all right. So, friends, today we talked a little bit about diagrams. Diagrams are pictures that we see, usually in nonfiction real texts, and diagrams are pictures that we see that have labels and they explain how something works. Today we explained how a wheel and an axle works. And what the question that was asked to us was, how can we use the text and the diagram to explain how a wheel and axle works? And we said the text and the diagram both showed that when the axle in the middle starts moving, so do the wheels on the sides. Okay, so they start moving together, which is exactly what we ended up writing for our answer on page number 20. At the bottom of page number 20, they're just going to want you to double check. Did you read the question carefully? Can you say the question in your own words? Which I did. Wheels and axles work because. And did you use proof from the text? Of course, we went back into the text and I highlighted the answer and that was my proof. Are your ideas in a good, clear order? Well, let me go back and check. Wheels and axles work because when the axle in the middle is turned, the wheel also turns. The diagram, whoops, I forgot my H. The diagram shows us that once the axle is turned, the wheel ends up being turned in the same direction. Okay, sounds pretty good to me. Did you answer in full sentences? Yes. And did you check your spelling, capital letters, and periods? Let me check to make sure that all of my capitals look good in the beginning of my sentences. Good. Do I have my periods at the end of my sentences? Perfect. All right, so I am A-okay. All right, friends, that is it for today, and I will see you tomorrow.